Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this per a tweet from Boxing Kingdom. Google is starting to remove websites that illegally stream boxing and other combat sports. The message from Google is, in response to multiple complaints that we received under the U.S. Digital Millennium Copyright Act, we have removed 11 results from this page. If you wish, you may read the DMCA complaints that caused the removals on lumendatabase.org complaint.
This has not only affected boxing, but it's also affected mixed martial arts. At how many press conferences did you see Dana White say that he's cracking down on illegal pirate streams and he's going to find the people that are doing this and making them pay? Hefty penalties, empty promises. Empty threats, I should say, because the technology has not yet caught up to the piracy, though what this hopes to do is limit the number of websites. Google's helping them now. So if there's a pirate link, a pirate stream via a Reddit page, for example, it seems that Google is now getting involved. And perhaps with Google's involvement, they can get in front of this thing and maybe help to put a stop to it. Maybe. It's long been felt that pirate streams, illegal streams, directly cut into the buy rate of a pay-per-view, whether it's an MMA pay-per-view or a boxing pay-per-view. There's two sides to that coin, two sides to that. The other side of it is that while there are a lot of people pirating streams, watching these fights via illegal streams, who says that these people were ever going to pay for a pay-per-view anyway? You can't lose what you never had. Two sides of that coin. On one end, the proliferation of illegal streams could be, theoretically, cutting into the buy rate of a show, but on the other end of it, you don't really know that. You don't know for sure that if there wasn't a pirate stream, these people would have paid for the show. Either way, it's stealing. Either way, it's theft. If you're watching something that you're supposed to pay for and you finagle away where you don't, it's still theft. It's still stealing. It's the byproduct of an oversaturated market. So in the previous era of boxing, there were nowhere near this many pay-per-views and nowhere near this many fighters demanding that they be on pay-per-view in order to get at the kind of money that they want to get at. No, in the previous era of boxing, you didn't see this many pay-per-views in a single calendar year. It's gotten progressively worse and worse, to where being a boxing fan and being able to see high-quality matches has become very expensive. In essence, boxing itself created this problem. When so much of the content ends up behind a paywall, that creates the demand for illegal streams, pirate streams. The proliferation of pay-per-views in tandem with the proliferation of illegal streams go hand in hand. If more of these fights were accessible to more fight fans, perhaps there wouldn't be as many illegal streams. Perhaps. The majority of the PBC on Prime shows have been pay-per-views. Quite frankly, all of them have been pay-per-views so far. Tack on Turkey El Sheikh and all the shows he's doing, the Riyadh season shows, those are all pay-per-views. Tack on the odd pay-per-view from Top Rank, because Top Rank don't do very many pay-per-views. The odd pay-per-view from Golden Boy, Garcia versus Haney, that was a pay-per-view. And it is very, very expensive to be a boxing fan. How do you fix it? Well, I look at all the cash injections from Turkey into the sport of boxing to supplement the effort and help make these big fights, to stimulate the sport, stimulate the audience, and I can't help but think that that money and those resources would be better suited and better directed towards the regular schedule of fights. It's not a coincidence that boxing was bigger in this country, at least. Boxing was bigger when it was more accessible to more people, when it was on terrestrial television and everything wasn't tucked away behind a paywall. That's when boxing was at its biggest. When you saw Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran doing Sprite commercials, or Sugar Ray Leonard and Larry Holmes doing car commercials, Marvin Hagler doing pizza commercials. Back then, there were nowhere near as many pay-per-views as there are now, and boxing was more accessible. So if what Turkey and the people in boxing want is to reinvigorate the boxing economy, at least in this country, that's what they have to do. They have to figure it out. Figure out a way to make boxing affordable again, accessible again. Because if you keep tucking everything behind a paywall, the market's going to continue to shrink. Even if Google is now assisting in the effort to get a fix on the piracy the sport sees, that still may not be enough, because if most of the content is tucked behind a paywall, people still might not pay. Even if they don't have an illegal stream to turn to, even if they don't have an alternative,
they still might not pay.
And if they don't pay, they don't watch.
They don't watch, they don't talk. They don't talk, the sport suffers for it. Falls further into the background of the American sporting landscape. The people in boxing don't want that.
They shouldn't.
There's a lot to be said about it. A lot of these fights end up being pay-per-views based on the fighters' financial demands, what they think they're worth, what they want. And a lot of the time,
You're asking for too much.
you want more than you're worth, and that is to the detriment of the sport as a whole. Because if enough fighters feel the same way and enough fights end up on pay-per-view, this is what ends up happening.
An oversaturated market. We'll see if these countermeasures by way of Google have any effect.
Exactly. Crawford and Spence were the only champions.
Well, Amir Khan was there all those years.
That is veteran boxing scribe Ellie Seckbach having a discussion about Terence Crawford's resume versus Gervonta Davis's resume and how Ellie feels Terence didn't fight any great fighters.
Wait
Cal Brook
up.
was there.
Crawford and Spence were the only champions.
Manny Pacquiao.
And they fought.
Manny Pacquiao was there for many years.
Nah, Pacquiao
What do
was
you
already
know?
on his way out.
I've brought this up at nauseum the last 5 or 6 years that Bob Arum was actually pushing to make that fight, and it was the people on Pacquiao's side that didn't want to do it. Freddie Roach, in so many words, said that he was concerned about that fight. He said that 6 years ago.
He said that several times, and it's well documented, so I don't know why Ellie would bring up Manny as a means to discredit Crawford's resume. If that fight didn't happen, it's because Manny didn't want it to happen.
And they
I'm
fought.
talking about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Pacquiao was there 6 years ago.
Okay, but
Okay.
whatever. At 135, there's always been 4 champions. Wow. No, there's 4 champions right now. How come what's his name is not fighting them?
It's a valid question. When Gervonta Davis was at 130, when he was at 135, there were always 3 other champions at the weight that he didn't pursue. Why not? Why didn't he shoot for undisputed like Crawford shot for undisputed? Not just at 140, but at 147.
But when he went up to 140, why didn't he shoot for Josh Taylor? He was undisputed.
He's fighting undefeated fighters. He has a great record. He's making millions. He's a 3-division champ.
Crawford fought undefeated fighters, but not just undefeated fighters, undefeated champions. Undefeated Victor Postol, undefeated Julius Ndongo, undefeated Jeff Horn, undefeated Errol Spence, undefeated Israel Madrimov.
Those names don't impress Ellie.
No, but Isaac Cruz and Rolly Romero.
That does?
That impresses Ellie Seckbach.
Those scrubs?
Was doing the same thing.
I said it's not his fault, but he didn't fight anyone great. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying facts.
Because there was nobody.
Robert.
There was nobody. When you have greats in your weight division and you're not fighting them, then you're doing something.
Why
you don't
did he
want.
wait 8 years later to fight Amir Khan? Or wait 8 years later to fight Cal Brook? They were finished when he fought them. They were done. They weren't in their prime.
Manny Pacquiao wasn't in his prime when Errol Spence Jr. signed on to fight him, and I didn't see Ellie Seckbach complaining. He was far removed from his prime when that fight was supposed to take place.
So yeah, he beat them, but I can't say he beat killers.
Crawford was probably still a 6-rounder when Amir Khan was in his prime. Yeah. Yeah, that's why.
What about Pacquiao? When he first came to 47, he waited 6 years for Spence.
Do you hear this guy? He's putting the blame on Terence Crawford that the Spence fight took 5 or 6 years to make. Wasn't it Errol Spence who said he wanted to clean up his side of the street first? Wasn't it Spence who said that Terence was on the wrong side of the street?
So that 5 or 6 years later, you can blame Terence for that?
What do you mean he waited 6 years? They both waited. And then
Okay.
Errol was with PPV.
But Earl was fighting bigger names.
Errol was with PPC.
And he was fighting a lot of dangerous fighters. He fought everybody. Sean Porter when he was fresh. Danny.
See, but
The only one he
that's-
didn't fight,
that's
Thurman.
That's what I was just saying right now. Like, nobody's going to be happy with nobody's career.
Okay.
Like, you know, you can say...
I think Triple G's
Wow.
career is very padded too. Triple G, Robert. A lot of the guys that he fought were smaller than him, 54-pounders.
A lot of the guys Gervonta fought is smaller than him. When he brought up Jesus Cuellar from 126 up to 130. Hector Luis Garcia from 130 up to 135. I think Ellie's evaluation of these boxers' resumes is disingenuous, and that's putting it lightly.
You're going to criticize Golovkin for that. Why don't you criticize Gervonta too?
Yeah, but he fucked everybody up too.
Okay, but if you start looking at the...
Okay, but at 160, who else was there for Triple G? It wasn't. He didn't fight in the era of Roy Jones or James Toney because those motherfuckers were probably beat him. But that's a totally different time.
Yeah.
In his time, he was a bad fucking 160 pounder. He's gonna be one of the best 160 pounders of all times.
But not because
With
it's
so many
competition,
titles,
I can't give him that.
Okay,
Not his fault.
It's not his fault.
But
It's
did
not
he
his
beat
fault.
those kids?
But if Tank is not fighting those guys, it is his fault because he could be doing those fights.
Different standards. Why do you have to take a
No,
different...
why wouldn't he?
Why indeed? I mean, what was stopping Tank from fighting Vasyl Lomachenko 4 or 5 years ago? What was stopping him from fighting Teofimo, or George Kambosos, or Devin Haney, or Shakur Stevenson?
Why wouldn't he?
He's fighting everybody.
No, he's not. Why wouldn't he? He's never. Oh, now he wants to fight Loma because Loma's like going on 40. He didn't want to fight him 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
So let me ask you this.
I've heard enough. Ali Sekbak has one of the oldest channels and one of the biggest in the entire YTBC. And this is how this guy covers boxing.
Well, he wants to pretend that Gervonta Davis's resume is on par or better than Terence Crawford's.
Did you hear him when he said that Gervonta Davis is a 3-division champion? Gervonta Davis has only ever held a full world title at 2 weights. Just 2, not 3. What he won at 140 was a regular title. Josh Taylor was undisputed champion at the time. Josh Taylor, not Gervonta.
Title he has now at 135. He didn't win it from anybody. It was emailed to him after Devin Haney moved up and vacated all his belts.
Ali Sekbak is pretty knee-deep in the sport of boxing, and he has been for years, so when he's willfully dishonest like this, I don't know if he's trolling or what, but I'd wager that his evaluations and everything he has to say has everything to do with who gives him access. Gervonta Davis gives him access, Terence doesn't. So he doesn't like Terence. And he says that Terence didn't beat any great fighters, but you thought Errol Spence Jr. was great.
And you think his quality of competition was great. You said Danny Garcia.
He fought Danny after the car accident. You think Danny's great. You think Errol's great. You thought he was so great, you picked him to beat Terence.
Remember?
Terence Crawford remembered. That's why he reminded you of that after the fight.
Remember?
What, he was good enough to beat Danny Garcia, and he was good enough to beat Ugas, but when Terence beats him, oh, he's not great anymore. Not to you.
Flip-flopper.
Terence Crawford would not get this kind of coverage if he were British. Having the same career accolades and the same resume that he has now, if he were a British fighter, he would be regaled and highly regarded and respected, unlike what we see here in the American boxing scene from the American media.
From Ali Sekbak.
Who's talking him down. He was talking him down before he beat Errol Spence Jr. He's still talking him down after he beat Errol Spence Jr. and after he became a 4-division champion, something that Errol is not or Gervonta is not.
These guys you love.
This is what's wrong with the American boxing scene. This is what passes for punditry in this postmodern era of boxing, this silliness.
Boxing used to be covered by real pundits, journalists. Now it's really just fanboys with a camera.
It's sad. It really is sad to see what boxing has become in this country.
What passes for punditry?
Terence just can't get a fair shake from these people. It's the way it is. And finally, in men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news, Canelo Alvarez backs Dimitri Bivol to beat Benavidez, says he did nothing at 175 pounds, and he didn't. When Canelo first ventured to the light heavyweight division, he took on a champion. He took on a champion straight away. David took on a former champion. Saul Canelo Alvarez is confident that he could beat David Benavidez and that his former conqueror could too. Benavidez, a former super middleweight, has moved on to the light heavyweight division and will soon be the WBC mandatory challenger for the winner of the undisputed light heavyweight title fight between Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol on October 12th. Bivol is the only fighter outside of Floyd Mayweather Jr. to beat the 4-division champion Alvarez, having done so convincingly in a UD back in 2022 during the Mexican star's second quest to become a 2-time light heavyweight champion. Needless to say that Canelo Alvarez got more than he bargained for with Dimitri, and so would David.
David is basic.
Simple. Should former sparring partners Bivol and Benavidez ever meet, Alvarez is leaning towards the guy who already beat him. If Benavidez is like what we saw in the last fight, yes, Bivol beats him. Alvarez told boxing scene and other media. Benavidez didn't look his destructive best in June during his division debut against Alexander Vajdik, going the distance to get a gritty win while sustaining several injuries. Benavidez absorbed 163 punches and landed 223 of his own to beat the former champion Vajdik. Benavidez is set to return on December 14th.
Against the lighter touch, I've no doubts.
Alvarez believes 175 pounds is Benavidez's natural weight class, and that it's going to be different for the quote-unquote Mexican monster moving forward because he'll be fighting guys at his own weight. Look, 175 is his weight class, and he did nothing at 175. He's not the same, said Alvarez. I don't want to say that what he needs to do. If the money is right, I'll fight anyone. Right now is the time for me to ask for the money. If they want me to fight him, they need to pay me good. If there is something good for me on the table, I'm in. I don't care, added Alvarez. He just brings 25 pounds to the table. It's a risky fight, but I can beat that guy, but not in the way I always did. It could be that I fight Benavidez before I retire.
I hope so, because I don't actually want it to be Dimitri that beats David. I want it to be Canelo that beats David.
Though if the way it happens is that Dimitri beats Artur, becomes undisputed light heavyweight champion, then faces David afterwards, well, let me tell you something. Bivol versus Benavidez would be Bivol versus Ramirez all over again. Zerto Ramirez, do you remember that lopsided fight? That boxing lesson? That's what he'd do to David.
David is too simple a fighter. His entire style, his methodology, relies on him being the bigger, stronger guy. And maybe he was at 168 with those guys like Andrade and Plant and Lemieux.
But he wasn't those things with Alexander Vajdik. No, he couldn't stay in character.
Oh, you say David's got some speed?
So does Dimitri Bivol, but unlike David, Dimitri's not acclimating to light heavyweight. He's a full-blown light heavyweight who's only ever fought other light heavyweights.
You say David throws combinations?
So does Dimitri Bivol, but who's got better feet? Who's got better footwork, Dimitri or David?
Dimitri.
Who's got better cardio, Dimitri or David?
Dimitri.
I saw what happened in the second half of that Vajdik fight. I saw David Benavidez uncharacteristically tire out, gas out. His output slowed. He wasn't staying in character.
Wasn't nothing on his punches.
I remember in one instance of the fight, second half of it, he was just laying on the ropes.
Where normally he puts guys on the ropes. He was put on the ropes.
Dimitri's got speed, rapid-fire combinations, and footwork. That pendulum step, David Benavidez wouldn't know what to do about that.
It's very obvious to me that Dimitri would beat David. That's why I don't actually want it to be Dimitri that does him in. I want it to be Canelo.
It seems that he's entertaining that fight, leaving the door open for it to happen before he retires. And I'm telling you now, Canelo would do to him what he just did to Jaime Munguia.
The difference.
Jaime Munguia was not busting at the seams. No, Jaime Munguia is not struggling to make 168, but David is, and he has been. So if he goes back down there for Canelo Alvarez, I don't expect him to have Jaime's punch resistance.
It will hurt David to get back down there. Oh, it would. But he would do it.
If Canelo asks him to, because Canelo's the boss. Not you.
Not your pretend fans online that don't buy anything.
Not the YouTube channels. Not the content creators propping you up. They're not the boss. Canelo is.
Know your role? And shut your mouth.
Shut it! Before Canelo Alvarez makes you wait even longer, because he can do that. He's the boss. Not the people pretending to be fans of you for hate of him. No, if they were fans of you, they would have bought your pay-per-view, your pay-per-views that didn't sell anything.
That's why your last fight was on an undercard.
I hope that Canelo Alvarez makes good on his word to face this guy before he retires, because even now, at 34 years old, I think Canelo's too good for him. I think Canelo beats him.
You don't need Dimitri to do it. Let Canelo do it.